I found the letter in my own mailbox. The return address was from Northwest Psychiatric Associates, and it was addressed to my son-in-law, Derek Carter. Not to me. To him. I stood there on my front porch in the October rain, holding an envelope about my own mental health evaluation, and I wasn't supposed to see it. But the mail carrier had made a mistake. She'd put it in my box instead of Derek's. My hands didn't shake as I opened it. They should have, maybe. A normal 68-year-old woman might have trembled at the violation, at the betrayal. But I'd been a literature professor for 40 years. I knew how to read subtext. I knew when a story was building toward something dark. Mrs. Henderson displays concerning signs of cognitive decline, the letter began. Patient frequently loses track of time, demonstrates impaired judgment regarding financial matters, and shows difficulty with routine decision-making. Recommend immediate evaluation for guardianship proceedings. I had never met Dr. Richard Pemberton. I had never set foot in Northwest Psychiatric Associates, but apparently, I was losing my mind. I looked up at my house. The beautiful Queen Anne Victorian I'd shared with my husband Robert for 35 years before he passed. The house we'd raised our 2 children in, the house that was now worth $1.2 million, according to the cheerful postcard Derek had left on my kitchen counter last week from his real estate office. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my cardigan pocket. Then I walked inside, made myself a cup of tea, and began to plan. Let me back up 6 months. That's when my daughter Sarah called, her voice tight with concern. Mom, Derek and I have been talking. The house is too big for you now. All those stairs, the yard. What if you fell and we didn't know for hours? I have a medical alert button, I'd said. And I like my yard. But don't you get lonely? She'd paused. We were thinking we could move in, just temporarily, to help out. I should have said no. But Sarah was my baby girl, and she'd sounded so worried, and I'd been alone in this big house for 5 years since Robert died, so I'd said yes. Derek moved them in 3 days later. He'd already given notice on their apartment. The first week was lovely. Sarah cooked dinners. Derek fixed the loose board on the back deck. We watched old movies together. I thought maybe this would be nice, having family around again. Then I started noticing small things. Derek in my study at odd hours, saying he was just looking for a book. Papers on my desk, rearranged. My file cabinet, which I always kept locked, standing open one morning. You must have forgotten to lock it, Mom, Sarah said when I mentioned it. You've been forgetting lots of little things lately. Had I? I didn't think so. But Sarah seemed so certain. The little things piled up. Derek mentioned I'd left the stove on twice. Sarah gently pointed out I'd told her the same story 3 times in 1 week. They started exchanging glances when I couldn't remember whether I'd taken my vitamins. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was slipping. I was 68, after all. Robert had died of early-onset Alzheimer's at 72. Maybe it was my turn. Then came the night I woke up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom and saw a light on in my study. I walked quietly down the hall and peered around the doorframe. Derek was at my desk, my property deed spread out in front of him, his phone to his ear. I'm telling you, we need to move fast, he was saying, his voice low. Before Michael gets wind of this, once we have guardianship, we can. He turned and saw me. Mom. His face transformed into concern so quickly it was almost convincing. What are you doing up? You shouldn't be wandering around at night. You could fall. This is my house, I said. I can wander wherever I like. Of course, of course. He gathered up the papers quickly. I was just reviewing some documents for you, making sure everything's in order. You know, for estate planning purposes. I didn't ask you to do that. Sarah's worried about you. We both are. He smiled. Why don't you go back to bed? We can talk about this in the morning. I went back to my room, but I didn't sleep. I lay there thinking about that phrase. Before Michael gets wind of this, Michael was my son. He lived in Boston, worked as a software engineer. We talked every Sunday. He had no idea Derek and Sarah had moved in. That's when I stopped doubting myself and started paying attention. The next day, I went to my bank. I'd like to review my accounts, I told my personal banker, Janet, whom I'd known for 15 years. Of course, Mrs. Henderson. She pulled up my information. Oh, I see Derek was in last week, asking about adding his name to your accounts. For convenience, he said, so he could help you manage things. My heart went cold. And did you? No, of course not. You'd have to be present to authorize that. She looked at me carefully. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, I lied. But Janet, if anyone comes asking about my accounts without me present, I want you to call me immediately. Can you do that? Absolutely. I made 3 more stops that day. My lawyer's office, where I discovered Derek had called inquiring about my will, the county clerk's office, where I learned Derek had requested a copy of my property deed, and finally, to Best Buy, where I purchased 3 small wireless cameras and a digital recorder. That night, I installed the cameras myself, one in my study, angled toward my desk, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, where Derek and Sarah did most of their talking when they thought I was in bed. I felt ridiculous, like I was in a spy movie, but I was also terrified, and anger was beginning to burn through that terror. How dare he? How dare they? The recorder I kept in my cardigan pocket. From that day forward, I recorded every conversation. 2 weeks later, Derek announced he'd made me a doctor's appointment. Just a general checkup, he said at breakfast. Dr. Pemberton, he's excellent, specializes in geriatric care. I have a doctor, I said. Dr. Morris. I've been seeing her for 20 years. But Dr. Pemberton is a specialist, Mom, Sarah chimed in. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Derek's colleague recommended him. He's really good at assessing cognitive function. There it was. Out in the open now. I see. I kept my voice calm. And when is this appointment? Thursday at 2. I went to that appointment. I know the comments on videos like this always ask, why would she go? Here's why. I needed to see exactly what they were doing. I needed documentation of their scheme. And I needed Dr. Pemberton on record. Also, I'd already made an appointment with my own doctor for the following day. Dr. Pemberton's office was in a sleek building near the hospital. The waiting room had abstract art and a fountain. Very expensive. Very legitimate looking. The doctor himself was about 50, professionally warm. Mrs. Henderson, thank you for coming in. Derek's told me so much about you. Has he? I settled into the chair across from his desk. What exactly has he told you? That you've been having some difficulties lately. Memory issues. Confusion about finances. He consulted his notes. He mentioned you left the stove on and nearly started a fire? That's interesting, I said, because I haven't used my stove in 3 weeks. My daughter does all the cooking. He blinked. Well, sometimes family members notice things we don't notice ourselves. He launched into his evaluation. Standard questions at first. What's today's date? Who's the president? Count backward from 100 by sevens. I answered everything correctly. He seemed almost disappointed. Then came the stranger questions. Do you manage your own finances? Yes. Do you ever feel confused about bills or payments? No. Has anyone in your family expressed concern about your ability to live independently? My son-in-law has, I said. The same son-in-law who's been asking my bank to add his name to my accounts. The same son-in-law who's been going through my personal papers without permission. The same son-in-law who, I believe, arranged this appointment without my knowledge and is having the results sent directly to him instead of to me. Dr. Pemberton's pen froze mid-note. I'm sorry, I continued, but I need to ask, are you friends with Derek Carter? The slightest pause. We're acquainted through the Rotary Club. I see. And did he explain to you that my house is worth over $1 million? Did he mention that he's a real estate agent who's been asking me to sell? Did he tell you that he owes I? Pulled out my phone, where I'd screenshot the public court records, $230,000 to various creditors, including a judgment from a failed property deal last year. His face went pale. "Mrs. Henderson, I'd like a copy of your evaluation," I said pleasantly. "For my records. You can send it to my address, not to Derek's." "Thank you for your time." I walked out of that office with my head high and my recorder in my pocket, capturing every word. The next day, Dr. Morris put me through a thorough cognitive screening, memory tests, problem-solving exercises. "The works, Margaret," she said when we finished. "Your cognitive function is perfect. Better than perfect. You scored in the 98th percentile for your age group." "I'd like that in writing, please," I said, notarized if possible. She looked at me seriously. "Is someone challenging your competency?" "My son-in-law is trying to." "Then you need a lawyer." Today, I already had one. Robert's old estate attorney, James Morrison. I'd called him the same day I found the letter. Now, I sat in his office with my evidence. The camera's footage of Derek going through my papers, the audio recordings, the letter from Dr. Pemberton that was never supposed to reach me. Dr. Morris's evaluation. James listened to everything, his expression growing grimmer. "Margaret, this is elder abuse, financial exploitation. We need to act now before he files for guardianship. Can he actually do that? He can try. If he gets Sarah to co-sign, if he shops for the right judge, if he can make a case that you're incapacitated and there's no one else to step in." He shook his head. "It's a long shot, but I've seen it happen, especially when there's this much money at stake. What do I do? First, we document everything. Second, we get your son involved. Third," he looked at me, "third, you might want to consider asking them to leave your house. If I do that, Derek will escalate. He'll file immediately, probably." "Good," I said. "Let him. I want this on record. I want a judge to see exactly what he's doing." James smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "You know, I always told Robert he'd married a woman sharper than he deserved. Let's make sure Derek Carter learns that the hard way." I called my son Michael that night. I told him everything. There was a long silence on the line. Then, "I'm getting on a plane tomorrow." "Michael, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't know. I should have been checking in more. I should have." "Sweetheart, you call every Sunday. You have your own life. I didn't want to worry you. I'm still coming." "And Mom? We're going to bury him." True to his word, Michael was on my doorstep 36 hours later. He was furious in that cold, controlled way he'd inherited from his father. The software engineer in him wanted to analyze the problem logically and destroy it systematically. Derek was not prepared for Michael. "We need to talk," Michael said, walking into the living room where Derek was watching television. "About why you're trying to steal our mother's house." Sarah gasped. Derek stood up, all false concern. "Michael, I don't know what your mother's told you, but I've heard the recordings. I've seen the camera footage. I know about your debt, your calls to the bank, your manufactured concerns about Mom's mental state." Michael's voice was ice. "So let's skip the part where you pretend this is about anything other than money. Your mother is not well," Derek tried. "Sarah and I have been trying to protect $1 million asset you can't legally access any other way." Michael pulled out his phone. "Should I play the recording from last Tuesday? The one where you told Sarah, and I quote, 'Once we get guardianship, we can force the sale and be out of debt in 30 days? Sarah started crying. Derek's face went red, then white. "Here's what's going to happen," Michael continued. "You're going to move out today, and you're going to withdraw any inquiries you've made about Mom's competency, her accounts, or her property. If you don't, we're filing a restraining order and a police report for attempted elder abuse. You can't prove. We have video of you going through her locked file cabinet, audio of you discussing your plan, witness testimony from her banker, and a psychiatric evaluation from her actual doctor showing perfect cognitive function." Michael stepped closer. "Want to test us in court? Because Mom's lawyer seems eager for it." Derek grabbed his car keys. "Sarah, get your things." But Sarah was looking at me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I didn't know it was like this. He told me you were getting sick, that we needed to help you, that it was for your own good." "Did you believe that?" I asked quietly. "Really?" She broke down. "I don't know. I wanted to believe we were helping, but there were things that didn't add up, and I just didn't want to see them." Derek was at the door. "Sarah, now." "No," she wiped her eyes. "I'm staying to talk to my mother. You should go." He left, just like that, grabbed his jacket and walked out, his footsteps heavy on the porch stairs. Sarah and I talked for hours that night. She'd been so caught up in Derek's narrative, so worn down by his manipulation, that she'd stopped trusting her own judgment. He'd isolated her from Michael, convinced her I was fragile, made her doubt every instinct that said something was wrong. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she whispered. "I'm your mother. I let him into your life. I let him move into my house. He manipulated both of us, Mom, but I should have seen it. And, sweetheart," I took her hand, "I need you to file for divorce. Soon, before he tries to claim he's entitled to part of this house as community property." She nodded. "I know. I already called a lawyer." 3 weeks later, Derek made his move. He filed an emergency petition for guardianship, claiming I was a danger to myself and others. He included a statement from Dr. Pemberton expressing grave concerns. He claimed Sarah supported the petition. He hadn't counted on Sarah's sworn affidavit contradicting everything he'd said. The court hearing was on a cold November morning. I wore my best suit, the navy one I'd taught in for 20 years. James sat on my right, Michael on my left, Sarah in the row behind us. Derek sat across the aisle with a lawyer he'd scraped together. He wouldn't look at any of us. Judge Patricia Reeves was in her 60s, sharp-eyed and no nonsense. She reviewed the petition, then looked at Derek. "Mr. Carter, you're seeking guardianship of your mother-in-law based on cognitive decline?" "Yes, Your Honor. She's been exhibiting signs of dementia, leaving appliances on, repeating herself, making poor financial decisions." "What poor financial decisions?" Derek faltered. She refuses to sell her house, even though it's too large for her to maintain." Refusing to sell one's home is now a sign of incompetence? Judge Reeves's tone could have cut glass. "No, but in combination with other factors." "What other factors? Be specific." Derek stumbled through his claims. The judge's expression grew more skeptical with each word. Then it was our turn. James presented Dr. Morris's evaluation. Then the recordings. Then the camera footage of Derek rifling through my papers at 2 a.m. Judge Reeves watched the footage in silence. When it ended, she looked at Derek. "Mr. Carter, am I correct that you're a real estate agent?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And that you owe over $200,000 to various creditors?" His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Yes, and that Mrs. Henderson's home is worth approximately $1.2 million. Silence. "Your Honor," James stood. "We'd like to submit evidence of Mr. Carter's communications with Mrs. Henderson's bank, attempting to gain access to her accounts. We also have a letter from Dr. Pemberton that was sent to Mr. Carter instead of to Mrs. Henderson, the patient, which is a HIPAA violation, and we have recordings of Mr. Carter explicitly discussing his plan to obtain guardianship in order to force the sale of Mrs. Henderson's property." Judge Reeves held up a hand. "I've heard enough." She looked at me. "Mrs. Henderson, would you approach the bench?" I stood and walked forward. My legs were steady. "I'm going to ask you a few questions," she said. "What's today's date?" "November 18th, 2024. "Who's the current president?" I answered. She asked me about my education, my career, my daily routine. She asked me to explain the Pythagorean theorem. She asked me to recite a Shakespeare sonnet. I did it all. Not because I had to prove anything to her, I could see she'd already decided, but because I wanted Derek to hear it. I wanted him to know exactly how clear and sharp and undiminished I was. When I finished, Judge Reeves nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. You can sit down." She turned to Derek. "Mr. Carter, your petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order. You are not to contact Mrs. Henderson, approach her residence, or make any further inquiries regarding her financial or medical affairs. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt." She paused. "I'm also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Though I use the term vulnerable loosely, Mrs. Henderson appears more than capable of defending herself." Derek's face was ashen. His lawyer was already packing up, clearly wanting no part of this disaster. "This court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. In the hallway afterward, Michael hugged me tight. "You did it, Mom." "We did it," I corrected. "All of us." Sarah was crying again, but different tears now. Relieved tears. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. And I'm so sorry." "I know, baby. I know." I held her close. "You're going to be okay. We all are." James shook my hand. "Margaret, you were magnificent in there." I almost felt sorry for Derek. A pause. Almost. We walked out of the courthouse into the November sunshine. My house was still mine. My mind was still my own. My family, the real family that protected instead of exploited, was intact. That night, I sat in my study with a cup of tea and updated my will. Michael would inherit the house. Sarah would receive a trust that Derek could never touch, even in divorce proceedings. The rest would go to charity specifically, to organizations that help elderly people defend themselves against financial abuse. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor who'd witnessed Derek's late-night visits to my study and had been ready to testify if needed, came over with cookies. "I knew something was off about that man," she said. "Too slick. Too interested in your house. You should have been a detective," I told her. "Oh, honey, when you're 72 and you've been married 4 times, you develop a sense for men who are after something." She patted my hand. "I'm glad you trusted your gut. That's the thing they don't tell you about getting older. Yes, your knees hurt more. Yes, you forget where you put your glasses sometimes. But you also know yourself better. You've seen enough manipulation to recognize it. You've lived enough life to know when someone's lying to you." Derek had counted on me being too polite, too uncertain, too afraid to fight back. He'd counted on me doubting myself the way society teaches older women to doubt themselves. He'd counted wrong. 3 months later, Sarah's divorce was final. She moved into a small apartment downtown and started therapy. She and I had lunch every Tuesday. The relationship was different now, more honest, more equal. She'd learned a hard lesson about choosing partners. I'd learned to trust my instincts even when my own daughter questioned them. Michael flew back to Boston but called 3 times a week now instead of just Sundays. And me? I'm still in my house. I still tend my garden. I still read late into the night and wake up early to watch the sun rise over Puget Sound. I volunteer at the library now, teaching a creative writing class for seniors. Last week, one of my students mentioned her son-in-law wanted her to sign over her house for estate planning purposes. I smiled. "Let me tell you a story," I said, "and then let me give you the number of a very good lawyer. Because here's what I learned. They count on us being silent, being afraid, being too embarrassed to admit we need help, or too proud to fight back. They count on us believing we're too old, too confused, too much of a burden. But we're not. We're experienced, we're resourceful, and we've survived too much to let someone take what's ours just because they think we won't notice or won't care. I'm 68 years old. I have every intention of living in this house until I'm 98. And if anyone else tries to suggest otherwise, well, I still have those cameras. I still have that recorder, and I definitely still have James Morrison on speed dial. Some lessons you only have to teach once.